Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 819, we've got Dan from Fully Charged live joining us, and we've got all sorts to talk about with Dan, and all the way from electric vehicles to heat pumps, smart home heating, all sorts of things. So we're talking to Dan about that. So let's get straight to Gary and Dan. Gary, good evening.
Good evening, Ian. It's always, as ever, a pleasure to be here.
It is, and it's especially a pleasure this evening because you've got a guest for us.
I have. Dan Caesar from Fully Charged is going to join us in a few moments, and we've had Dan on the show before, and he's always been really entertaining, talking about all the events they've been doing. He's busy beavering away doing some stuff himself at the moment on the show, so we'll talk to him about that as well.
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's get straight over to Dan.
Yes, thanks. So we're joined tonight by Dan Caesar from Fully Charged. And Dan, it's great to have you back on the show again. We've had you on a few times in the past, and always good to have you as a guest.
It's great to be here. Really, really good to be here.
And you've been getting quite adventurous in the last few days, because you're actually appearing in front of the camera as well as behind the scenes now.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I think I've been with Robert on Fully Charged for 5 years now. So no one could say I sort of thrust my way to the front of the view. But when we started talking about doing home energy, that was my background, and it became quite clear early on while we were kind of writing that actually I understood it better than anyone else who would be presenting it. And after a while, probably partly due to the pandemic, even I said, well, maybe I should give it a go, because why not? And we started working on that earlier this year, and we just started to release it on Sunday. But I'm very passionate about all things home energy related, in particular heat, which makes me a bit of a special kind of nerd, I think. But I really enjoyed it.
But we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because I think it's a really interesting subject, especially with all the news which is coming out over the last few days, which we will definitely get onto that as well. So I just wanted to go a bit of background on Fully Charged, just so people know what it's all about. So Bobby, who you spoke about there, is Robert Llewellyn. People know him from Red Dwarf as Crichton, and also from Scrap Heap Challenge, and quite a few other things as well. I've seen him in a few things over the years, this was kind of his passion project, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you think about it, he was way ahead of the curve. He was in California filming the American version of Scrap Heap Challenge. He was out there a lot, and sort of certain things filtered in, whether it was electric cars or broadcasting on YouTube and things like that. And I have to say, hats off to him. He was running something else called Carpool, you might be familiar with.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
he had a bit of experience on YouTube, and then he decided to get in more depth into electric vehicles and then clean energy or renewable energy as well. And that's 11 years ago now. And if you think about it, most people weren't even thinking about that at that point in time. And I think he was very, very early into the game, and it's taken 11 years, but it's starting to get really quite exciting now.
And you're doing a lot on Fully Charged now, aren't you, as well? I mean, we've obviously got the YouTube channel, but you've got the show coming up as well.
Yes, we have. Yeah, we have. I'm delighted to say that we've got the live show come back the first weekend of September, the 3rd, 4th and 5th, to be precise. And it's been a long time coming, because by the time it comes round, it will be 25 months or something, 26 months since we last did one in the UK. So it's a long time. We've had a big hiatus. We did one in America just before the sort of pandemic reached European shores. So no, we're really, really delighted. I mean, one of the things is we love digital media, love podcasts, love YouTube, love Twitter, love all those things, but you just don't get the same sort of feedback that you do. No, and also, frankly, it is just more, it isn't quite nice, and it's quite such a nice place to be by comparison to actually meeting people physically. So I think for us, seeing people who watch the channel again is going to be, very exciting and probably quite emotional, So we're really excited about that, and the lineup is going to be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, we're having to work pretty hard, because we didn't really know 4 months ago whether it would be back on, and it's got absolutely gangbusters in the last 3 months. Absolutely crazy. So there's a lot of midnight oil being burnt to get over the line with that show.
So this is going to be in Farnborough?
Farnborough International, so moving down from Silverstone. We outgrew Silverstone, if you remember, Gary, pretty much within the first 2 years. It was a very difficult choice. The UK is not particularly blessed with brilliant venues. And so we're going to Farnborough, a lot more space there, which is good because we're actually going to have the show is almost all of it's going to be outdoors this time round, which was our decision a long way out, just to make sure people were comfortable from the point of view of co-mingling together after all this time. But the plan is we want to do something up north as well in due course. That's all our plans are probably months behind schedule. You know, we would love to. We've got ideas for Manchester. We might even do a small event in Glasgow later this year. So you know, from our point of view, we don't want it just to be the south of England show, but for us, for moving away from Silverstone, Farnborough was the right venue. And
you've got a lot of space there, so because I understand there's an awful lot of exhibitors coming.
Yeah, it's going to be busy. I mean, I have to say, you know, from starting it back 3 or 3.5 years ago, I don't get that involved with the event anymore. I try and pass it on to people who are better than me at doing that. But I think there's certainly over 150 exhibitors. It might be getting close to 200, I think. It's been crazy, and the issue at the moment is, I think, squeezing people in rather than ringing people up, and we've still got a few weeks to go actually, so I think it's going to be a sellout.
That's good. And if it's a place, if you want to see an electric vehicle, to try electric vehicles out, it's going to be the place to be, isn't it? I mean, there's cars going to be there which nobody else is seeing anywhere else.
That's right. We're very, very fortunate, and that goes from new cars. So I know that we've got Nissan Aria. I think it's the first time that will have been in the UK. MG have got a facelifted new vehicle that's coming out. There's a few others as well that I can't talk about yet. And everything through from, you know, two-wheelers and one-wheelers and trikes and bikes and, you know, motorbikes and cars and converted classics and trucks and vans and a whole array of electric vehicles there. But it is good to have the car companies there. I mean, they've not had an easy year and a half, I would say, with things like the Suez Canal and microprocessor shortages and other things. So it's great to have a lot of them present. And yeah, you'll pretty much be able to see anything that's available there. And we're running quite a lot of test drives as well, which is always a great way to convince people that actually now's the time to switch from my old combustion car to an electric car instead.
So if people are interested in attending, are tickets still available?
They are. We'll be selling them probably right into the end. I think that's the way it normally works. In fact, it tends to go absolutely crazy the last 10 days in particular. I think it'll be more the case than ever this year, because I think a lot of people will be waiting to see how many cases there are of COVID and things like that. And obviously we're going to be really, really safe in that score. But we're expecting about 15,000 people, and we have an upper cap of about 18,000 as well. We would stop if we got to that point. So I think we'll probably be selling to the end. But if it goes a bit quicker, we just started a big radio campaign today. If it goes a bit quicker, then we'll be sure to warn people, get in and book before it all closes.
And we'll put a link to the website in the show notes as usual, so people want to.
There's a real demand for some, you know, these in-person events now that, you know, we missed them when they weren't here, and now there's things you can do. There's a real, you know, I feel like I want to use my time up, you know, well, and not just sat at home, because you never know when we'll next be sat at home.
True. I mean, I think it looks like, from our point of view, the biggest threat is actually the weather.
The good old British weather.
But we've got some sort of a better period of weather coming in, I think, which will be good. But I mean, I think one of the things that, as someone who loves all the tech that's on show, is I never get to see it really, which is a great shame. We're trying this year to make that happen, because I think it can really take 2 days to get around the show. You know, it's that sort of size now, and there's so many different things to see. And as you say, we get lots of exclusives and lots of competitions and lots of weird and wonderful things going on. So, you know, we're really excited, but above all, just to see the people we know and have kind of been talking to about electric vehicles and clean energy for so long, and also to welcome in new people who, frankly, 2 years ago probably weren't in the headspace to entertain getting an electric car. And, you know, now when you talk to people out and about, people are much more open-minded, I find.
So the way I'm seeing our audience now, I'm getting more feedback, positive feedback about electric vehicles and in general. and questions coming in more than we used to previously do. So that definitely is the case. Yeah, I think that's really good. And you've kindly said that we can come to Fully Charged and record our podcast there. So hopefully we'll interview an awful lot of people and get a lot more information for people as well who listen to the show.
Yeah, definitely. Very welcome.
And I suppose it's especially timely with like some of the news we've seen today as we record on Monday about the climate change studies, and it as we move away from the pandemic, I think it's almost the next big thing that everyone needs to focus on.
Yeah, it's very difficult to process what's happening at the moment. I mean, obviously today's report was, I guess, some sort of confirmation. I think they talked about 1.5 degree sea rise in temperatures as being sort of beyond doubt, effectively unequivocal, I think was the word that they used. And we've seen some particularly horrific extreme weather events over the last couple of months all around the world, and it's very difficult to process. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, I find it quite a daunting subject. You know, we have a huge challenge ahead of us, you know. And I guess on one hand you can take great confidence in the fact that actually we can mobilize as a human race, and we've seen that recently. But also the flip side with the vaccine rollout is obviously it is easier to get injections into people's arms, I think, than it is to get people to stop polluting. It is easier. And equally, for every 9 rational, sane people who want to decarbonize but just don't quite know how, there's always probably 1 in 10 who is kind of anti it. And that's a real challenge. So from our point of view, Fully Charged is kind of antidote to some of the FUD, the fear, uncertainty and doubt that's out there in the world, and we try and sort of put the right messages across where we can.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And that comes onto your home series, because I think this is quite critical now, because people, I mean, I certainly, one of the questions I've always getting is, what can I do around the home? How can I actually improve the home in terms of the green credentials, and so also saving money, and there's this real cost convenience, do no harm trade-off, isn't there? You at the moment it's expensive to be environmentally friendly, although you've got some very good tips in your first edition of your show.
Well, I mean, most of the stuff that we do is really eye-wateringly expensive, right? We would say to you, oh, buy an electric car, and that's not easy. But I suppose if you were getting rid of one car and getting another car, it's not beyond the wit of man to say, actually, well, that's part of my budget. I already have a lease for a normal car. I'm going to get a lease for another car. And don't get me wrong, lots of people can't even afford cars. We understand that as well. But with the home stuff, it is difficult because you don't replace your boiler that often. You know, should be around every 10 years. Some people go a bit longer than that, obviously. But it's quite a complicated subject. People just don't have that sort of money lying around. I mean, you know, yeah, there's the odd person, but we really wanted to make a series that addressed that squarely. So it's about cheaper measures. We do talk about heat pumps and stuff as well. We go to the more sort of expensive end of what can be done. But we really wanted to talk about kind of energy hacks and simple things that people can do and cheaper things that people can do as well. And we wanted, frankly, to go to normal homes. Quite often, Robert gets invited to really nice, fantastic new housing estates, or to, you know, some, you know, pioneer project that someone's got, and you know, they're great, don't get me wrong, they're the kind of the halo projects that get people kind of thinking. But you know, there's 29 million homes or so in the UK. Most of them are ordinary homes. You know, how do we retrofit some of these technologies in? So it'll take a little while, and that's the problem. So we tried to create a series which starts with the cheaper measures and then moves through the things that other people can do. And in our opinion, a lot of people are saying, you know, is this my last boiler? But you know, where do I go? How do I tackle that? What do I get? So the whole series has been something we've really enjoyed working on. We've got some great projects. We did a fantastic one in Sunderland called the Core 364 project, where we visited a tower, series of tower blocks in Sunderland. And the 364 in the Core 364 title refers to the fact that there's 364 dwellings in 7 tower blocks, and they've taken a gas boiler out of all 364, and they replaced it with a ground source heating loop, Kenza shoebox, and Sunamp thermal battery. And that's just an extraordinary project. And if you take 364 boilers out, quite a big effect from a carbon perspective as well. So that was great to tell that story. Heat pumps is going to be a big part of what we talk about, and then we've managed to unearth, or we've just been fortunate with our timing to find a couple of zero emission boiler technologies which we think are really going to make people think as well. So yeah, it's been it's a passion project for me, heating, and it's really complicated. And what we've tried to do is try to make a very complicated topic as simple as possible, which doesn't mean to say we won't go back and do really deep dive in episodes on some of the technologies, but we've tried to just. You remember, Gary, we did a Maddie Goes Electric series.
Yeah, series, yeah.
The idea really, it's getting people who don't know where to begin, who aren't that savvy about their heating or thermostats, and to start that kind of conversation. So we're very proud to have done it, and we've had 2 episodes out so far. We have a third out on tomorrow, which is Tuesday the 10th, and then we've got 3 more in August. So by the time people get to Fully Charged Outside, the idea was we'd have all of the series out, and we have quite a lot of the technologies there at Farnborough as well, so people can talk to them about those technologies and maybe buy them.
Because that's always been the case with Fully Charged show. You've always had the home technologies as well as the cars. Maybe not quite so much emphasis on them, but there's always been some amazing stuff. But you mentioned Sunamp there, and I've always been incredibly impressed by what they do with heat storage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the last year, ironically, it's been easier to film cars than anything. Yeah. So we have a kind of an internal ratio. It's very hard to keep track of this, but we do 50% cars, 25% other vehicles, and 25% clean energy. We keep roughly to that, but it's quite hard. And as I say, during the pandemic, the easiest thing to do was to get a car from a car company, to get them to drop it at Robert's house, for example, sanitize it, and then Robert would take it out for a test drive. So I think Robert did about 10 SUVs in a row at one point, and looked a bit, weary of that process come last summer. It was harder to go into factories. It was harder to go into homes. But that's always been a key part of it, because you'll know if you've got an electric vehicle, suddenly the other ways you use energy, suddenly you start to think about it much more, and that's a journey for most people who get an electric car. So I think for us, I think Robert and I both describe ourselves not car guys. We like them, but we're not not car guys. We're kind of interested in the energy transition as a whole, and we think the car could be the hero of that story. But for example, heat pumps have got a huge role to play.
And I suppose for home energy and heating and things like that, with car, it's fairly simple. You trade your one car in for another, so you go petrol or diesel to electric, job done. But with the house, I mean, I've got a boiler in here and radiators and things. And I can't just say to my wife, I've got a really good idea, I'm just going to rip all that out and bring all new stuff in. So you've got to have that way of transitioning it and doing it in small stages, affordable stages.
Yeah, it's very tricky, that. And obviously what happens invariably is there was a day when I first started in the heating industry, there was a day about mid-October, I think it was October the 14th, and British Gas said that's the start of the heating season. That was when suddenly the phones would start ringing off the hook. That was when boilers were being turned on up all across the country. And some were not coming back on straight away, and there were problems, and they would have to go out and service them, and so on and so forth. And in the situation where your boiler breaks down, whether it's your wife, your husband, your kids, or whoever, the tolerance for going without hot water in particular and heating, it lasts maybe a day or two, right? So if a boiler installer comes into your house and says you need another boiler, 99 times out of 100 you're going to say, yeah, I would like a boiler. So switching to a heat pump is very doable, but it requires more thought. And is a little bit trickier, which is why we're quite excited about the zero emission boiler technology we're bringing onto the series as well, because that's more sort of plug and play. That will be easier and less intrusive, a bit more like a plug-in hybrid, in that it will be a good stepping stone. You might just replace one with it. Can't quite go to the heat pump just yet, but I could get this zero emission boiler, plug and play, and I could do that. So yeah, we're interested to see how that kind of pans out. But it's been great. It's been great to do it. But it really is kind of a bit like Maddie Goes Electric. It's trying to pitch it at a level that our existing audience can go, yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's useful. I'm getting up some useful tips. But also we can onboard, as terribly American say, new audience members who go, actually, I'm interested in this, but I just don't know where to begin. So it's quite hard to pitch that. And obviously we've got some super intelligent people watch the channel who start saying things, well, you want to talk about X, Y, and Z, and we do, but the purpose of this series really is to educate at sort of more of an entry level.
Yeah,
that's really important, I think. So, just for our audience members' benefits, so we talk about heat pumps, and there's two varieties of those, and I think that's I get this question so often is, what is an air source heat pump? What is a ground source? And I know you cover it in the series, but
yeah, well, I mean, the real thing, and why people get particularly excited about heat pumps is because for 1 unit of energy you would put into something like a traditional heat engine, like a boiler, you will get 3 or 4 units of energy out of a heat pump. So instantly, you know, if you replace all the boilers with heat pumps, obviously there is an electricity demand, but actually the total energy is significantly lower. So that's why people get so excited about heat pumps. We're also quite far behind in the UK. They sell like hotcakes in Scandinavia and in Europe, and there's a mature market for that. And in the UK, we are a bit behind a long way behind on that deployment of that technology. It's very difficult to talk about things in generic terms because there's always someone who'll pop out of the woodwork and say, well, what about this and what about that? But generally speaking, you know, a ground source needs to, you know, go in, you know, need to actually take heat from the ground. So you might need a borehole to be dug, or boreholes to be dug, or a slinky in your garden, for example. So generally speaking, that suits people who've got a garden or maybe a larger garden and can have that work done. An air source heat pump is effectively sits normally outside the envelope of your property and uses the atmosphere, uses the atmospheric air, and through what is akin to wizardry, can actually make you know, cold air warmer. So it works perfectly well in the winters, for example. And a lot of people liken it to kind of a reverse fridge, if you like. And someone could say to you, well, it's -5 outside. How can that work? And to a refrigerant, -5 is very warm. So they basically, you know, can take that kind of atmospheric heat and convert it into more for the property. So they typically work a little bit better for kind of smaller properties. There's lots of talk about, you know, how well insulated a property needs to be, you know, zoning of the heat with air source heat pumps, very complicated stuff that's beyond me, frankly, you know. But from my point of view, it's about finding really good installers. We've got some great ones in this country to talk you through the process. So air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. And then there are some other things that we touch on: infrared heating, as I say, these zero emission boilers as well. So there are options. We didn't want people to come to the end of our series and go, oh, heat pumps are too expensive, I can't do that ever. So we wanted to offer some other options as well. But it's a big job of work over the next 10, 15, 20 years to get people to actually say, no, I'm going to switch, as you described, Ian. I've got to turn my boiler. How do I do that? It's a big job of work to do that. So that is where we do need governments to get it. And that's where we do need governments to, you know, legislate. There was in 2005, when I first started in the industry, there was quite famously a bit of legislation where they mandated the installation of high efficiency boilers only. And that had a huge impact. The industry just had to deliver that. The consumer didn't notice it even happening. But we went to, I think it was all A and B rated boilers installed overnight. So governments can do that. And that's why governments really need to listen to the IPCC report as issued today. And they realize that their power is they can actually implement things, and they can actually use statutory instruments to make things change and quickly. And I think that's where we're up to. I think we really need to force the pace now.
I guess the one thing which always comes back on this, and it's a conversation I've had, is the cost of stuff, particularly in the UK. I mean, you mentioned the Scandinavian market. I know my Scandinavian relatives, particularly the ones in Denmark, always absolutely astounded how much heat pumps cost in the UK compared to what they can pick them up for. But that's still down to market forces, isn't it? Hopefully, if they did mandate that everything had to go, then the prices of these things would start to drop because there would be significant demand there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I know that Octopus Energy are looking to get into this space. I think they've said they believe they can get air source heat pump installation down to between £5,000 and £6,000. Believe it or not, most boiler installations now are, well, it's very common for them to be over 3. possibly even 4. So there is a difference still. But my opinion is, you know, and you can call me an old commie if you like, an old communist. I hang around with Robert enough. You call me an old communist, but I think people who don't have the facilities or means to pay for this should have these technologies paid for. You know, fuel poverty is a very serious issue, and if you enable the market to get started, and you say actually we're going to subsidize as a nation, we're going to subsidize, you know, people in fuel poverty to have heat pumps or something similar, and you said, you know, how many people will fit into that bracket? I've got no idea, but let's say it's a few 100,000. Then you create manufacturing of a few 100,000 heat pumps, and voila, your costs start to come down. So I think it will happen, but as you say, it needs scale. It needs scale to make that happen.
And that's always the challenge, but it's as someone rightly said today, the cost of doing nothing's a lot more expensive than the cost of doing this.
Yes, that is very, very true.
Yeah. So, would you rather spend a few £1,000s getting your house a bit more economical? Would you rather be surrounded by water or fire?
Yeah, it's a very difficult time, isn't it? I think you know, it's difficult. There are days where I'm hopeful, and there are days where I'm very concerned about the future. I've got 2 young kids, and you know, you do wonder. Already, it's quite alarming, I would say, some of the extreme weather events this year. You do sort of scan forward sort of 10 years, and you think, well, it's changed a lot, in my opinion, in the last five years. You know, where will we be another 5 years, another 10 years? So it is concerning. It's a huge task, and from my perspective, the UK's done quite well in some things, actually. You know, wind power, we're doing really well. We are a world leader in that. In other areas, we're not doing so well, but then, you know, you could say the same. Could you? Norway doing well with electric cars, but you know, they still have quite a burgeoning oil industry, for example. So everywhere's different. We could take the learnings of different countries, but yeah, it's an intimidatingly large, the scale of what we have to do, and that's, you know, we try in our small way at Fully Charged to kind of demystify and break down some of these barriers and say, you know, you can do it. You know, you can switch to an electric car. Or you can just switch energy tariff, or you can get your house insulated or get smart thermostat, just maybe fly a little less. You know, all these things, quite contentious, you know, certainly was a few years ago, but I think we have to have honest conversations.
Especially things like the smart home stuff, like the smart thermostats, they are easy to do, and we've talked about many times, and we've all got them now, and that is a simple little step that you can take. And I guess that's the one thing of the show, the live show as well, is people go along and talk to experts, installers, and people that are actually doing it and actually fitting these day to day to perhaps simplify things. You know, when you just talk to someone face to face about how you get it installed.
Yeah, I think if you come with a bunch of questions, I think, to one of our live shows, and there's so many experts there, whether it's the live talks. I think we've got over 50 live talks this year, so you can sit on your bum and you can kind of listen to all the great conversations that are going on, or you can go around the different exhibition stands, you know, and you can talk to people as well. But for a curious mind, it's an incredible show. You come away with huge value just from saying, well, what have I learned, you know, from this show. And from our point of view, test drives are great, and they're very powerful in terms of converting people, but we've got a particularly soft spot for the live talks that we do. We really enjoy putting those on. And I think when we did Silverstone last time round, we did one on battery materials, and we had it was 1,000 people room. It was completely full. We had standing room around the edges, so there must have been at least 1,200 people. And you know, that was a very gratifying moment for us, because we felt, actually, well, who would have thought that many people would be interested in batteries a few years ago? So we're getting there, but I'm very ambitious and very driven to keep spreading the word about all these technologies.
Yeah, those live talks are amazing, and you actually put a lot of those out on YouTube as well, didn't you? So people.
We have done, yeah. We're just humming and hawing about how we do that this year, but yeah, we try to put some of those out afterwards if we can.
I think the ones from the last show are still, a lot of those are still very relevant. People can catch up on them, and there's a lot of really good information in there.
Yeah, it's great. We've got some. I mean, if you think about it, there are just some amazing people in the industry.
Yeah.
And the industry is changing. You know, it's become more competitive. I don't know if you've noticed that over the last year or two. There is clearly a penny dropping moment for people, entrepreneurs who might have a bit of wealth, and people are coming out of oil and gas, or other people going, actually there's a market here. And so that, the mood has changed a little bit. I would say it was very communal, wasn't it? Even just recently, 2 or 3 years ago, and we missed that, but that's part of what has to happen, isn't it? These things do need to become commercialized. So it will be, above all, we'll look forward to seeing our friends like you guys at the show and just having a general catch up.
That'd be good. Well, I'm looking forward to that as well, and interviewing a few people. But as you say, it's interesting this year, almost a competition for interview space as well. People are very demanding that they want to be interviewed. Which is
you'll definitely be busy. You coming for the full time? Or?
Yeah, I'll definitely be the full time. And we'll see what we can do in terms of staffing and getting enough people in, because I think last time, as you say, there's just so much to see there and so much to do. It's actually difficult to do the interviews and actually see anything. So
it's a challenge, and hopefully we're trying. The Farnborough Air Show is obviously at Farnborough International. Yeah. So there's a very vast outdoor space, and we were quite relieved this year because obviously we're going to do all of it, or mostly all of it, outside. So from our sort of standpoint, having it, people not feeling that they're too crowded is going to be important. People want to wear masks, obviously they'd be very welcome. We'll put out some sort of official guidance a bit closer to the event, but it's been like operating on shifting sands, because you don't know. You look daily at what's going on with case numbers and the rest of it, and until recently, even as recently as a month ago, it was pretty concerning. Obviously things that look to have flattened out a little bit, and thankfully the people who are double jabbed can come with a high degree of confidence, as long as they don't start kissing each other.
It's not that kind of show.
It's not that kind of show, no.
If you told Bobby that. But I mean, I know the plans you put in place, so people should feel really safe going there. I think it shouldn't be an issue at all.
No. From that point of view, we'll take it very seriously. Farnborough International are a great venue. They take that very seriously. We consult regularly with Public Health England. They've had a few events through there already. I mean, you will have seen, Goodwood a few weeks ago had
Silverstone.
Right, Silverstone had 160,000. So ours is actually quite small with 15,000 by comparison to that. So from our standpoint, it's just great to get it back. And then once we've done that, we've got to start plotting forward to doing events in America and Europe next year, and hopefully Australia as well.
It's really good. It's good. I mean, obviously, I've got a slight vested interest in the event industry anyway, so, as you know. But so I'm glad to see events starting to come up back on again. But it's really good to see you putting those on. So we talked about your show, and obviously some of the other stuff you've been doing on Fully Charged. What's up and coming? What are you excited about other than your show?
That's a good question. Well, we took on a new head of automotive content. Is his posh name. His normal name is Jack Scarlett, a new car presenter. He joined us back in June. We're really excited to have him there. I think Robert was quite tired of doing all the car reviews. I won't lie. I think the plan was never for him to do cement last year. It was just the way it worked out. Really, financially, it was a big test for us. Big stress test for us as a business just to get through last year. So Robert had to dig quite deep and do a lot of episodes. But the idea before that was always that Robert would be the kind of anchor man. He would do the plum jobs, so to speak, and then he would introduce other people. And that's why we were kind of building out a network of other presenters. So we're delighted to have Jack. He's a super, very, very knowledgeable. A lot younger than me and Robert, so he kind of taps into a bit of a different group of people, which I think is helpful as well. And then we've got obviously our presenters in America kind of on standby, presenters in Europe. We've also got Elliot in China and a new presenter called DK in Korea, because so much is going on in particular in Korea and China. So very excited about that. I think we are just starting to think about a trip to Europe. After Farnborough, and we are hoping to get out to America in October, but obviously that's out of our control at the moment, so we have to wait and see. And then we're also going to try and go up to COP26 and make some noise up there. So I'm working on a bit of a top secret plan to go out there and kind of not full extinction rebellion, you understand, but certainly I think to apply a bit more pressure, because I think, from my point of view, our point of view, we understand some of the things that need to be done, and in my opinion, governments in the UK but elsewhere are not actually deploying technology. They're talking about things a lot, and maybe there's things that can be done more quickly. So we're certainly looking forward to be up at COP26, and then we might have around December we might have a bit of a breather, but very excited about next year and getting a bit more back to normal. And the big goal for us is to get beyond YouTube as well. We love being on YouTube, don't get me wrong, but obviously we think we make really good broadcast quality sort of telly, if you like, and it seems logical to go and get other audiences on different platforms. YouTube's a bit of a funny one for us sometimes, because actually the message we're trying to put across, I think, is quite serious-minded sometimes. And YouTube is great, but I think a lot of people who are serious-minded don't go to YouTube. So I think for us to find other platforms to go onto, that's probably my biggest single challenge once we get through the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that's always spreading the word's always important, though. I think it's interesting because we had GridServe on, Sam from GridServe on last week, and he's really keen to come on our show, because obviously we're talking to people who aren't converted, who aren't the so I don't actually know the percentage of our audience who've got EVs or got stuff in the home, but I don't think it's a huge percentage at the moment. We've got a lot of people who are interested, but not that much. And it's really important to get that message out. I mean, I know I preach a bit sometimes on the show.
Yeah.
You have to listen to me, but I think it is an incredibly important message at the moment, and today's news just emphasises that. I think
it's getting more.
Yeah, it's really so the situation's pretty acute, really, isn't it? And we just, I think UK is fairly well sheltered from some of the more extreme weather events, but there's a lot of developments built on floodplains in the last 5 years. I always feel like we're sitting on a bit of a time bomb, and I do feel like we will have our own severe events at some point. No one wants that, of course, but I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. But we've still got a chance to do something about it. I know we've passed a tipping point. We haven't passed the final tipping point, so there's it's still worth doing things. It's still worth actually making a difference.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that from our point of view, while it can feel very daunting, absolutely we should do as much as we possibly can. It can make a huge difference. And the world is already more unstable. And that we might be stuck with some of that. But it could get a lot worse, so we really do have to act. So from my point of view, what I'd like to do in tandem with what we're doing in COP26 is I would like to really drill down to the essence of maybe the 10 or 20 things people can do. I'd really like to really get down into brass tacks on that. I saw something on the BBC today which kind of talks about that, but quite often the mainstream media, they don't quite get it right, actually. There's always been an obsession about kind of light bulbs and things like that, and actually you'll know what the biggest things are. It is oil, gas, coal, whether it's in cars or in buildings. It's also things like it's the meat industry. There's a lot of hard conversations that have to be had. Flying, clearly. And it's not often to put your hair shirt on and say you can't use these things again, or you can't do any of these things again. But flying's a really interesting one. Flying with purpose, I think, is absolutely important, right? There's a lot of people who will be desperate to fly and see their loved ones after the pandemic. And absolutely, of course, they should be able to do that. But I think the thing of us sort of jetting around, and quite often it's the 1%, isn't it, who fly a lot. So there's a lot of tough conversations ahead, I think, and it could be quite a lot of turbulence, to use an appropriate phrase.
Yeah, I do wonder actually if lockdown's actually done a favour in that respect, because a lot of people have found the convenience of being able to hold meetings like we're holding one now, without having to fly halfway around the world to do it. And I certainly noticed that from the event industry. There's obviously local events seem to be coming back, but the big pan global type events don't seem to be coming back as quick.
No, we did think that they would potentially struggle, those events, because going to Mobile World Congress, which is obviously a very big one in Barcelona, amazing show, but obviously bringing in people from all across the world, maybe that's just not practical anymore, that type of show.
Or maybe go down to smaller regional variants of it and repeat it. Or hybrid events seem to be the way we're going. I think that actually, and that could have quite a big effect on this travel side of things. I mean, I think certainly Jen around the world, and you can see the airlines are worried about it in terms of their numbers. But I think that's, again, as you say, there's hard decisions to be made there.
We're quite excited. Well, we're very excited about electric aviation, but obviously that's going to maybe take care of some short haul, and it's going to take a few years to come online, isn't it? So, it's really difficult. I mean, I think for youngsters today, they're going to look through a very different lens than we did. We were able to travel very, very freely, and we were very fortunate to be able to do that. And I'd like to still be able to do that occasionally, but unfortunately, we will have to make sacrifices, and that will be difficult because a lot of people will not want that. I don't want it really, but it's necessary, and it's a really tricky thing. Sort of thing I debate with my wife. She'd love to get on a plane and go somewhere hot. Creates tension in your own kind of house, doesn't it? So it's not an easy subject at all. But we know some of the things that need to be done. I think governments, quite often they talk about things like carbon capture, and which is a kind of your carbon equivalent of trying to, get milk out of a cup of tea. It's a bit too late in some ways, and it's bloody difficult, And so really, we have to really look at our use of fossil fuels. But electric cars have got a huge role to play, I think. And I think most of your audience, if they're not ready yet, once they do try it, a year or two into the electric vehicle experience, they'll all be like, "What was the fuss about?" That's my experience when I talk to electric vehicle drivers.
Yeah, I was at the EV festival at the weekend, and it was interesting talking to some of the people who turned up there who were considering it. I mean, the biggest conversation always is they're way too expensive. And and I actually do think they're way too expensive. I think that there's not much justification for some of the markups we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah.
If MG can produce the MG5 at the price it is, why can't some of these other companies produce the same? But
no, you're singing to the choir on that one. It is difficult, and certainly I think there's going to be there has to be a reality. I think car companies. We talk a lot about Tesla. We talk a lot about China, and some of these. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? So if people aren't producing cars at 15,000, 20,000 pounds, someone will come along and do that. It will happen. And they will sell, and so it's not a given that the car companies, it's very difficult. I mean, it is. I wouldn't want to be a senior car executive. It's an incredibly difficult time for them, but you can see, can't you, that there's some manufacturers, and I'll get told off for not name checking all of them, but there's some like VW who clearly get it, and we work with Stellantis, they clearly get it, Kia, Hyundai, there are others who absolutely get it, and they're trying to turn their respective ships around us as quickly as they possibly can, but they're huge organizations, just incredibly difficult to do that. So it is a very, very difficult thing. But you'll see with tech adoption, you've got a very tech savvy audience, that what happened with from a one type of phone to smartphones, for example, happened very, very quickly. I'm not sure it's going to happen quite as quickly because of the size of the hardware involved, but nonetheless, it once it tips, it can be really, really fast. And the car companies that aren't taking it quite as seriously, or a little bit behind the curve, could face some quite serious consequences.
Yeah, you're going to need a bigger venue than Farnborough to get all the cars in a couple of years' time, I think. It's
really interesting. We certainly hope so. That would be the plan.
But it certainly seems to be going that way, and it's right. And some of those people you name, and particularly Kia and Hyundai at the moment, some of the stuff they're looking like they're producing out in terms of technology. Pricing I'm not quite so sure about, but technology I think is amazing. And I think when things like 800-volt charging become the norm, then the experience for people like Ian on his travels would be a lot better in terms of longer journeys. So that quick top up and go is definitely an interesting one. But I think there's definitely there's also a market for smaller batteries and smaller and lower costs as well. And I think there's a huge market for that. So it's really interesting to see that. So if you had one thing you'd like to cover and you haven't been able to cover it yet, what would that be?
That's a really, really good question. I mean, I think from my perspective, I can get very passionate about these technologies. I think you call me on a bad day and that climate change is really, really high up the agenda today. So, I'm still kind of trying to take that in. I also have one of the reasons some of these tech became popular is because of air pollution. That's a big issue as well. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I think kind of don't want to lose sight of, and we try and probably lead with this on the show more than any of those issues I've just mentioned, is that the technology that we're talking about, whether it's a heat pump or electric car or electric bike or whatever, is generally just leaps and shoulders better, heads and shoulders above what's come before. And I think that, if you've got a tech savvy crowd, they'll appreciate that, because they'll know, well, from the type of technology we had, even 10 years ago, there's been an absolute quantum leap forward. And you will experience the same thing if you go to an electric car. As I say, I hadn't ridden an electric bike ever until the other day. I've been very busy running the business and very busy looking after my kids. And my wife and I got away for a weekend on our own for the first time in a long time. We said, should we try an electric bike? And it was an absolute revelation. And quite often with electric bikes, people say, well, it's just, you're just lazy. It's just for lazy people. You're like, well, no, my dad, for example, is 74 and he started cycling all the time. He never would have done that. He is cycling, but he's obviously assisted by the battery and the motor. And so obviously for your athletic cyclists, it's not really a great boon, but for everyone else, it's incredible. So all of these technologies I've tried are just miles better than what has come before. So I think that's probably the thing I would say to anyone who is fascinated in technology. Try these things out, and I think they will speak for themselves.
Yeah, well, so I'm certainly never going back. So. and that would have been regardless of the ecological benefit, which obviously is important, and particularly the pollution benefit, which is one thing was one of my driving forces initially. But having driven, and particularly driving the I-Pace, of course, the difference in performance and everything else is just leaps and bounds above anything I've driven before. So I've driven quite a lot of interesting cars over my years. So yeah, I'm definitely never going back. And that was the conversation I have with most people at Electric Vehicle Festival. I didn't actually meet anybody there who would ever consider going back to anything else other than a full EV.
Yeah, and we're really excited. I mean, Fully Charged, we're trying to do it more and more, is to talk about vertical takeoff and landing, artificial intelligence, all these next level technologies as well. We want to do more of that sort of stuff, because it occurs to us that electric cars, that shift is happening now. The shift to renewable electricity is happening, and that we will continue to cover those areas. But actually, some of the next stuff is really, really interesting, and there's going to be some it's just going to be an incredible time. I mean, we look at future movies. I was watching iRobot the other day, which is it's got some good moments. It's got some flaws, but obviously you tend to look at the future through is it Blade Runner, is it iRobot? What you look at. I always find when they direct these films, the actual depiction of the future is generally the most interesting thing for me. What technology that they got, or the Minority Report's a really good one as well. And from my standpoint, talking about those kind of that next wave of technologies, because we're inhabiting that. I mean, the things can be done we take absolutely for granted now. I mean, drones are just like a normal thing now, just totally normal. I mean, we film a lot with drones, for example, and you kind of don't get opportunity sometimes to sort of actually go, wow, we are kind of living in the future already, and there's some great things to come. I'm confident of it. But certainly the fact that a lot of these climate saving clean air technologies are better technology is the thing we really want to get across, because I think that's more likely to persuade people than anything.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Dan, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
I could talk for hours, unfortunately. As you know.
We will definitely be seeing you at the Fully Charged Outdoor.
I can't wait.
And we'll get you on one of those interviews as well, because I always love talking to you on the event, because there's so much to talk about around the event. So it's always.
I'll give you the talk for sure.
Absolutely good.
Great, thanks for joining us, Dan.
Cheers, guys. Take care.